If you're building a modern cloud native application, it is very likely that you're leveraging cloud resources. Now, these could be storage buckets, RDS databases, messaging queues, or whatnot. So, how do you provide access to these resources during development for developers? How do you ensure that the environment they are developing in encompasses all of these resources? Because if you do not provide these resources to them, how are they supposed to spin up the application end to end and see the changes of their code? They won't be able to, right? And they would have to rely on methods like CI pipelines or staging environments, which are too far from the developer. They happen at a later stage of the development, and this means developers need to commit their code, push it, wait for the CI to run, or wait for an access to the environment, and then they get the feedback if their change is working as expected or not. As you can possibly imagine, this process severely lengthens the inner development loop. My name is Arsh, and in this video we are going to see how you can automate your development experience using Okteto and Pulumi. Let's take this to-do list application as a sample modern cloud native app. It has all your standard front-end, API and database services, but what's special about this app is that if I add a to-do here, it allows me to take a backup of all these to-dos. So when I hit the save button and I go to this S3 bucket, you'll see that it exported the to-dos in a JSON file. So now imagine you want your developers to make a change on this app. Now you want them to add error handling to configure that if the bucket is not responding or if the to-dos didn't get saved, they should show a message on the UI. How do you provide access to all of this to your developers, right? Do you create a bucket for them each time? Do you give them AWS credentials and ask them to create their bucket? How do you deploy all these different pieces? And what you are missing is that the front-end developers or just the API developers, they might not even have the knowledge of navigating that scary AWS console and going and creating their bucket on their time. So as you can see, building cloud native apps is not that easy. But it does not have to be this complicated. Okteto allows you to automate this entire experience. You, as platform engineers, can configure a manifest which has all the instructions needed for automating this process of creating this development environment, provisioning this bucket, and deploying all the microservices. Let's see how that workflow looks like. Okteto allows you to use the same tools you would be using in production, like Pulumi, Argo CD, or whatever, to automate the infrastructure creation for your development environments as well. So example, you're using some Pulumi scripts to create that S3 bucket. You can incorporate that as part of your Okteto manifest to create the same bucket during development as well. We'll get into the how later, but let's see what experience you can enable for your developers as platform engineers. Once you have the Okteto manifest configured, all your developers need to do is click Launch Dev Environment, choose the application they work on, for example, in this case, the Pulumi Okteto demo, and click Launch. What this will do is it will start to deploy all the microservices part of your application, including the database, which in this case, it runs in a container. This will also use the Pulumi scripts we had and create the S3 bucket. Now, just to simplify, I've already have this application deployed in a different namespace, and you can see that once the application is deployed, Okteto gives you endpoints where you can visit and access your application. For example, if I go to my main endpoint, I can see that my application is deployed. Similarly, I have an endpoint for the API as well, which is currently empty because we do not have any to-dos here. But we also have the endpoint for the S3 bucket, which was created as part of this development environment. And what's special is that this bucket is specially for this particular environment. So you see the first name of this bucket corresponds to my namespace in Okteto. And the best part is that once I delete this bucket would automatically get deleted. So developers would not have to remember to delete this bucket every time, and you'll be able to manage your cloud costs. So if you see the steps which were run as part of provisioning this dev environment, one step was creating this AWS bucket. And if you see, we are running a Pulumi script here. And this is the same script you might be using to deploy to production. And not only that, this also gives me a link to my Pulumi dashboard where I can see the stack which was deployed as part of this environment, the stack which created that bucket for me. Now, what's really cool is that all of this is very easy to create as a platform engineer, because let me go to my code editor where I have this repository clone and show you how this was done. The first thing you'll see is I'm using a index.ts file, which is a TypeScript file where I have the code to create my bucket. Now this is the same file you might be using in production to create your infrastructure, and you can use those files as it is with Okteto. When it comes to the actual automation of deploying all the microservices and creating this bucket, all you need to do is configure one Okteto YAML. Now in this YAML you see that we have this step of creating this AWS S3 bucket, and all I do here simply is use the Pulumi image which has the Pulumi CLI installed, and then run the Pulumi commands which I would normally run as part of any CI process or manually to create that infrastructure. And what's cool is that Okteto allows you to configure an external section where you can populate this with the endpoints of the S3 bucket and the Pulumi dashboard which we saw on our Okteto console right here. And now when developers have all of this deployed, they can get to the code writing phase immediately by going to their code editor, any code editor, and running Okteto up. What Okteto up does is it replaces the container running any of your services with a dev container. And what's special about this dev container is that it will synchronize the code developers write on their local machine with the code which gets run inside the cluster. So any changes we make locally, we'll be able to see the result of them at the endpoint where we can access our application. So if I go to the endpoint now, I can see first of all that my client service is in development. And when I visit the endpoint, let's say I want to change something. Maybe I find this name not easy to pronounce and I want to replace this with something simple like my to-do list. All developers need to do is just go to their code editor and make that code change. And in this case, I know that the code for this application is written here, and let's just change this to my to-do list. And since this is a React app, it'll automatically detect this change and build it. And when I go back, hit refresh, I can see that the name has changed. And all of this is on a live endpoint. You can share this endpoint with anyone on your team and get feedback and immediately iterate on that feedback, and then just send them the link again to confirm that your changes are working. All of this without having to commit any changes. This is as simple as hitting save on your local machine. If you found this interesting, try out this application for yourself. All you need to do is have Okteto installed on your cluster and a Pulumi account, both of which are free to get started with. You can sign up for a free 30-day trial on our website okteto.com and get started immediately. Deploy this application, add something, change code, maybe add a prompt when the to-dos are saved, or maybe add a date timestamp to the backup we get in the S3 bucket, just to get a feel for the amazing experience you as a platform engineer can create for the developers on your team with this powerful combination. I hope you found this video useful, and if yes, subscribe to our YouTube channel to stay updated whenever we post more such content. I'll see you in the next video, and until then, happy hacking!